This story is about a woman who went to her in-law's house. Because her sister-in-law, filled with vanity and extravagance, was on the brink of divorce. There, in front of her mother-in-law and sister-in-law, she told her brother-in-law's husband to get a hefty alimony and get a divorce. What happened? Let's find out together. Please like and subscribe our channel.
Hello there. My mother-in-law blames me for her son's divorce. No matter how much they are my family. Isn't it impossible to take sides if they are in the wrong? My mother-in-law is someone who saw everything I did as a mistake. Picking on me at every turn and making my life miserable was a hobby for my mother-in-law and her son. Even my husband, who always took my side, says I've gone too far this time. I wonder if I've gone too far and would like to ask you all. I plan to show this post and all the comments to my husband, mother-in-law, and her son. I don't know how they will react. But I want to show them that people with common sense think this way. I was in my late 20s and my husband was in his early 30s when we got married. When we got married, the son was in his early 20s and dropped out of college and was working. Even though he was earning a minimal wage, he was very extravagant and vain. He not only flaunted luxury items, but also said that a man without a luxury watch lacked style. When I asked if wearing a luxury watch would suddenly give you style, he got frustrated with me and said, "That's not what I meant. You're so frustrating." I wasn't sure if he wanted to talk or not. Conversations with my mother-in-law and her son were always like this. They didn't answer my questions, but attacked me personally when they thought it was disadvantageous. I've come to realize that there are more people like this than I thought in social life. It's his freedom to like luxury items and think that men who wear them look stylish, so I didn't think I needed to say anything. I just thought it was frustrating to see him talking about stupid things, as if they were obvious. But he often made derogatory comments about me, saying I look shabby. I enjoy saving money. My husband also became similar to me after we got married. When we got married, my husband had less than 20 million won saved up, and I had about 70 million won in the bank. We combined our money, took out a small loan, and started our married life in a leased house. I was surprised to learn after we got married that my husband had lent more than 10 million won each to my mother-in-law and her son. While preparing for the wedding, I told my husband to get the money back from my mother-in-law and her son. My husband was awkward, saying he didn't know how to ask his family to pay back the money. What more could I say to my husband, who said he couldn't ask his family to repay the money? But my mother-in-law and her son didn't seem to have any intention of repaying the money. So, I was a little angry. After marriage, we lived by saving money considering our income and expenses. But the son called us and asked to borrow money, as if he was demanding the money he had entrusted. There were many cases where he asked to borrow a few 100,000 won. But there were also cases where he asked to borrow more than 1,000,000 won. I live by balancing my income, expenses and savings, so I don't have any extra money. However, my brother-in-law seemed to take other people's money lightly, easily, suggesting that I should take a cash advance on my card. He claimed that if he gave me the money next month, I could just pay it back then. I flatly refused his request. As expected, he criticized me for being too harsh, questioning if this could happen within a family. Soon after, I received a call from my mother-in-law. She sarcastically asked if I was trying to become a billionaire by being so ambitious, stating that families should help each other. Before marrying me, my husband was the type who readily lent money, like an atom, whenever his mother or brother-in-law claimed they needed it. I knew he had lent money to his mother and brother-in-law and hadn't been repaid. So I firmly told my husband. I said that once he marries me, there should be no lending of money to his mother or brother-in-law, and he solidly promised me this. So when his brother called to borrow money, my husband flatly said he had no extra money to lend. The brother, who had been good at borrowing money before meeting me, went around accusing me of causing a rift between my husband and his family. Knowing full well that he needed money to indulge in luxuries, how could my husband and I lend him money, while I know his salary is low? He's a person who doesn't contribute a penny towards living expenses, while living with his mother. So how could he be lacking money? He's not even paying rent or utilities on his own. Anyway, it seems the brother was annoyed that his brother no longer lent him money as in the past. He seemed to believe I was responsible for this. The brother often criticized me, saying I was living in a miserly way, as if I was trying to enjoy wealth and honor. My mother-in-law also made similar comments in a mocking tone. Unable to bear it, I told my mother-in-law and brother, "We're the sons and daughters from a poor family. We have to save money and live by saving. What else can we do?" The brother insisted that people should still live decently. When I asked if living like him, spending more money on luxuries than his salary, is living decently, he said, "We just don't communicate well," and stormed into his room. There were many times when I wanted to slap him out of annoyance, due to his habit of attacking personally when things were disadvantageous, and avoiding when he had nothing to say. "Do you want to act so superior?" My mother-in-law sided with the brother, making comments like this. This kept repeating, and I started to wonder, am I thinking wrong? But no matter how I rethought it, I believed my mother-in-law and brother were making unreasonable remarks and actions. Last fall, the brother got married as well. It was a bit amusing thinking that even a woman as vain as him also got married. My brother-in-law's husband was an ordinary person. He was an average office worker from an average family. And it seemed like he wouldn't be able to tolerate my brother-in-law's vanity and extravagance. I thought things might change when my brother-in-law got married, but nothing changed. She continued to team up with my mother-in-law and make snide remarks at me. A few months after she got married, I went to my in-laws' house and found my brother-in-law there, with a bruise on her face, claiming she had been hit by her husband. My mother-in-law and brother-in-law spoke of her husband as if he was a terrible person. I started to think that he might be a violent person when he gets angry. My brother-in-law, crying in front of my mother-in-law and us, said she was going to get a divorce. The following weekend, my mother-in-law asked my husband and me to come home. Her son-in-law was coming, so she wanted us to be there as well. My husband, determined not to let his brother-in-law off the hook, went to his parents' house that weekend. Listening to the story from my brother-in-law's husband, it was a series of surprises. One day, a man rang the doorbell at my brother-in-law's house. When asked who he was, he said he was from some loan company and was looking for my brother-in-law. Her husband asked what he was there for, and the man said he was there to collect overdue payments. My brother-in-law nervously asked, "But why are you looking for me here?" The man rudely replied, "Can't I come looking for you?" As my brother-in-law's husband talked with the man, he was shocked to learn that my brother-in-law had taken out a pretty large loan. He demanded an explanation from his wife, but she responded with her characteristic brazenness. She told her husband that as a husband, he should be able to pay back that amount of money. Unable to believe what he was hearing, they stopped talking to each other. My brother-in-law sneered at her husband for not talking to her, saying he was narrow-minded. Her husband asked why she was talking as if he was the bad guy, when she was the one who did wrong. My brother-in-law yelled back, asking what she did wrong. Then she called her mother and told her she was going to get a divorce and to come pick her up. My mother-in-law immediately went to their house. and started yelling at her son-in-law. She also became angry, just like my brother-in-law, asking if he couldn't even afford to pay off his wife's debt. When he asked if what they were saying made sense, my mother-in-law slapped him for talking back to his mother-in-law disrespectfully. After being slapped, he yelled, asking what they were doing. My brother-in-law then hit her husband for yelling at her mother, and she poured out all kinds of insults at her husband. In the process, her husband ended up hitting her. As it turned out, my mother-in-law and brother-in-law had hit her husband together, and he ended up hitting his wife's face while resisting, which left a bruise. My husband had gone to his parents' house, vowing not to let my brother-in-law's husband off the hook. But after hearing the story, he seemed deflated. My mother-in-law was saying such audacious things to my brother-in-law's husband. Like, "You're the husband. You should live mollifying your wife, shouldn't you?" And my brother-in-law was glaring at her husband and saying things like, "I was so distressed because my husband was tormenting me." I told my brother-in-law's husband how hard it must have been for him. I said, "Who could live with such a woman? Who is now shouting when she should be asking for forgiveness?" I mentioned that it was obvious that my brother-in-law had used the loan to fund her extravagance. My brother-in-law's husband said he had come to talk about divorce anyway. He said it was embarrassing to have been hit by his wife and mother-in-law, but he had filed a complaint the previous day and was planning to get a divorce after receiving an adequate amount of alimony. My mother-in-law looked shocked. I couldn't believe the look of surprise on her face. So, did my brother-in-law's husband have to apologize even after what happened? My brother-in-law started yelling at me, asking whose side I was on now. I said that my brother-in-law has always been extravagant and vain, and that she will never get over her love for luxury in her lifetime. Even when my brother-in-law acts like a madwoman, if her mother defends her, my brother-in-law will never change. My brother-in-law's husband said he had learned that the hard way. He said if he forgave my brother-in-law this time, it was obvious that another debt would come out in no time. My brother-in-law's husband said he was scared of that too. I told my brother-in-law's husband to get as much alimony as possible and get a divorce. I also told him to get his feet out of the mud as soon as possible, since both my mother-in-law and my brother-in-law have given up on becoming decent people. After my brother-in-law's husband left, my husband asked me why I had been so harsh. I said, "What's wrong with just stating the facts?" My mother-in-law said that if my brother-in-law got divorced, it would all be because of me. I asked why it would be because of me. I told her that she raised her daughter to be a crazy woman, and because she slapped her son-in-law. My brother-in-law is getting a divorce, so the responsibility is all on her. I told her frankly, what man would live with a crazy woman full of vanity? Like my brother-in-law? Since my brother-in-law hid the fact that she is a crazy woman and got married. My brother-in-law's husband was a victim of marriage fraud, so he should get a lot of compensation. I said that and came home. My husband said my words were not wrong, but did I have to be so harsh? I got angry at my husband, asking how he could say that knowing how my mother-in-law and my brother-in-law have treated me so far. I said I didn't do anything harsh. My mother-in-law and my brother-in-law will probably hate me for the rest of their lives. I will try my best to look as unpleasant as possible in front of my mother-in-law and my brother-in-law, just like how they treated me. I want to ask you all, was my behavior too harsh as my husband said?
I'm curious about the intelligence of a person who goes to slap her son-in-law when her own daughter has taken out a loan and is playing the victim to her husband. It seems like she made a good point, but what do you all think?